Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson, and today I am joined by Friday Golf's very own Joseph LaMagna. I wanted to do a little check-in with Joseph, talk some very early Masters storylines, and talk a little bit about what's been going on in the PGA Tour world of men's professional golf. So we talk a little bit about Luke Clanton, the Masters, what he's kind of watching out for, a little Ryder Cup, and many odds and ends in between. So this was a really fun chat with Joseph, kind of recap what's been happening on the PGA Tour. Before we get to Joseph, let's talk about our partner, Maui Nui Venison. Maui Nui offers the only 100% wild harvested meat that's completely stress-free and responsibly sourced. It's perfect for anyone looking to elevate their meals with delicious, high-quality protein. This stuff is awesome. They sent out a bunch of their product. They have ground product, like bulk product, so you can get like cuts, medallions, ground venison. But then they also have these sticks. They are tremendous on the go. I've already put a bunch in my golf bag, and I've been like, I'm always looking for really healthy, lean protein sources, and this has really fit the bill. On top of that, it's the healthiest red meat that you'll eat. It is good. They are solving an issue in Maui, an invasive deer population in Maui. So it is really a great product, and Maui Nui is offering Friday podcast listeners a limited collection of their favorite cuts and products. Given the nature of the way they make the product, it is limited by nature. So don't wait. Head over to MauiNuiVenison.com. That's MAUINUI venison.com/egg to secure your venison today. That's Maui Nui, MAUINUI venison.com/egg. Thanks to them. All right, let's get to Joseph LaMagna. All right, Joseph, we are in the midst of I'd say this is probably one of the more exciting stretches of the PGA Tour schedule. We are done with the West Coast swing. We are in Florida, and we are barreling down on the big events of the year. The Players is 2 weeks away, and it is we are finally at the point where it's not too early to talk Masters. So I wanted to touch base with you, kind of catch up on early season findings, and get some thoughts out there. I wanted to kick off. Last week was the big news of the week, I would say. The big news had to be Luke Clanton earning his PGA Tour card. The number 92 ranked player in the world has earned his PGA Tour card through PGA Tour U accelerated program. It's effectively you earn points for different things. You make a cut of the PGA Tour event, you get a point. You win certain events in amateur golf, you get points. Some 2, some 1. So Luke Clanton has really ascended, I would say, in the last year, has become the number 1 ranked amateur in the world, the top amateur kind of prospect, supplanted Gordon Sargent, which would be hard to believe a couple of years ago. I think, when you think back to a couple of years ago at the Masters, he got a special invitation by Augusta National. Everybody was talking about, this long hitting amateur in the field. There were, he played with Rory and Brooks Koepka. Everybody was talking about this long hitting amateur. The long hitting amateur that was in that Masters field, who's contending on the PGA Tour now, is Aldrich Pikeeter, not Gordon Sargent yet. Obviously, Sargent has also satisfied his PGA Tour U. This is not a drive-by of Gordon Sargent. He also has earned a PGA Tour card. So we have 2 amateurs that are playing amateur golf that have already earned their PGA Tour card. Clanton just gets it. Joseph, Clanton's played a ton on the PGA Tour. He has I don't think he's an amateur only by name. What so far, what are your early findings on Luke Clanton? How excited should we be? There are a lot of lofty expectations. Everybody's already saying this is the next Ludvig, this is the American Ludvig. Are those off base, or are those are those predictions, proclamations worthy?
I don't think you have to be cautious with getting overhyped. I think the Clanton hype is real and should be real. And what stands out to me about Clanton, a couple things. One, he's an excellent driver of the golf ball. He can hit 190 ball speed, like top end ball speed, while keeping it on the planet, which just isn't something that many golfers can do, even professional golfers, right? You're talking about the best drivers of the golf ball in the world, the Ludvigs, Rorys, Cam Young, people like that who can hit it, 185.
Why'd you say Cam Young softly?
Because he's not doing a whole lot else very well right now, but he is a great driver of the golf ball. But I think what also stands out to me about Clanton is his consistency. I believe he's made 9 of 12 cuts in professional events, PGA Tour events, and that also includes the US Open last year at Pinehurst, which to see a golfer of that age who's already polished enough to be playing that consistently well, it's a huge difference from somebody like Nick Dunlap, who's very talented, but he has not been consistent, right? He's won twice. He won the Amex and the Barracuda, but the week-to-week consistency isn't there. With Luke Clanton, the week-to-week consistency is there. He's missed a couple cuts, like right on the number. He's finished runner-up a couple of times already. John Deere last year, and then the RSM. So when you combine that level of polish with the upside, the consistent ball striking, it's pretty promising, Andy. I don't think you got to be cautious again that he may not end up turning out like we think he will, but I think it's reasonable to be as excited about him as any other prospect in the last few years.
I think, with golfers, it's always easy to get caught up and sometimes fooled by a hot run. A player that just gets hot for 9 months and ascends his way. And that you see that a ton happen with PGA Tour players, like where, somebody gets hot and they just have the right stretch of golf at the right time. And golf's a very hot or cold thing. I think as you laid out, like when your game is built around elite driving ability, it makes you a lot less susceptible to hot and cold streaks. Because when you're, the way the game is today, if you can touch 190 on the ball speed and you drive it reasonably straight, you are going to have a lot of wedges from the fairway. And that's just it's hard to be really bad if you're hitting wedges into greens from the fairway. Like that, there's only so many, you think about what a really bad wedge is from a PGA Tour player, it still usually hits the green. And from that point, then you two putt and you walk away with a par. And if you give a player enough wedges or mid irons on par fives, you are going to run into a lot of birdies. I think this is where, the discourse, like how Rory McIlroy's been really the player or DJ, the two players that have been the most consistent players. And obviously DJ the last couple of years has fallen off sharply. He might be retired at this point, but those players were so generationally great for so long because they were two unicorns off the tee and have continued to be. I think the underrated story of golf over the last 5 to 10 years really is Rory McIlroy is one of the few players that has not been displaced by a younger generation in terms of his driving dominance. He has maintained, he has improved as a driver of the golf ball into his 30s, which I don't think we've really seen a lot of players do. So I think with Clanton, his game being based around this supreme driving ability, it's similar to Ludvig's game. It's built around a really solid foundation of driving the golf ball well. There's just not a lot of fluctuation there. I think that's the thing. The other thing I'm super keen on Clanton with is age. He's 21 years old. He's effectively 20 and a half. He's 4.5 years younger than Ludvig Åberg, which is a frightening thing.
Yeah, and if, like you're mentioning with Luke, if he stunk with his irons, like it'd be a little bit of a different conversation. And a lot of those, I don't know that I need to name names here, but a lot of guys with a ton of ball speed that can't necessarily do a whole lot else. Luke Clanton's a good iron player. He's not necessarily gaining strokes approach consistently on the PGA Tour yet, but he's shown that he can hit his irons. And I know Sean Martin had followed him around at the RSM last fall, and that was his main takeaway. Like, he's got a lot of control over his irons, almost in a Morikawa way, like the way he's able to control his shapes and trajectories. Clearly, he's not the iron player that Colin Morikawa is yet. Like, Luke's numbers don't look like that, but he's not hitting it 340 yards down the middle of a fairway and then, clunking it and missing a bunch of greens with his wedges. Like, he's a fine iron player, and if he can develop a little bit more there, you're talking about a top end ball striker. So very optimistic.
Just because this is fun, who would be your the opposite of that? The player that hits it ways down there and then clunks the iron. I have one in mind.
Cam Champ?
That's exactly.
I mean, yeah.
I'm forever haunted by watching him shoot 75 at Skokie Country Club in the Western Am from like 30 yards in front of every green.
I think. I don't want to come after Pot Geeter yet. He's a potential that he's got some other. Look, I'm not going to call
player
him,
that we diametrically disagree on.
He's got to show a little bit more, but he's really young, right? Cam Champ isn't young anymore, and he didn't really develop in the way that a lot of people thought he would. I would say that that's an example of a player who kills it off the tee, doesn't have a ton of other game, and maybe one here or there on some friendly setups. It can pick off a 3M Open, but not going to have consistent results if you can't do anything else.
I have heard through the grapevine that one of the biggest issues with Cam Champ was work ethic.
I have heard that too.
So maybe not always talent. I think the something that you always are hesitant on, and this could be a bridge to Pot Geeter, is who they're doing it against. Who's the competition? Is this the one thing that would leave you with any concern when you look at Clanton's resume, is that he hasn't done it against top flight competition? You're driving by my guy Aldrich, and I'm looking at one of his, probably the best field he's had a lot of success against was the Farmers Insurance Open, which Pot Geeter was playing in the final group of.
I think in general, yes, needing especially ball striking numbers against top end talent. But Luke Clanton finished T41 right at the US Open last year in his first major championship. So it's not like he doesn't have any kind of track record. And in some of the weak field events like the John Deere and RSM where he finished second, I mean, that's still a very high result in a weak field. So I think where I'd be concerned is if it was nothing but T25s in weak fields and then you just haven't proven anything.
I think so. One of the big questions I think this spring will be, does Augusta National extend a special invitation to him? And when Gordon Sargent got it, it was kind of wondering what it was. People thought it might be an NCAA exemption that they just weren't putting a name on, but we haven't seen it since. When you think about like a special invitation, it feels like he'd be worthy. I know that Sean Martin put out that he would be a top 10 player in the world. That's not completely accurate based off of like some numbers that you've alluded to. But the fact is, I think it'd be pretty safe to say that he would be a top 50 player in the world.
You're saying
if it wasn't for the minimum divisor.
Yeah.
And that would earn him a Masters invite. So I do think there is like a real case for Clanton to get a Masters invite. It sounds like he's going to stay amateur until he's done playing this collegiate season with Florida State.
Yeah, you're alluding to the Sean Martin tweet that he'd be a top 10 player based on his average points earned in an event. And if some of those events were older, they'd be decayed according to the OWGR's methodology. So yeah, he'd probably be a top 50 player. It's hard to say like anything definitively, but I don't know. Do you think they need to extend him an invite? I'd be fine with it, but I don't really. It's not like he's won or anything. Like I wouldn't be offended if they didn't.
I think it would just be weird. Like I think like it just is like kind of weird. Like what was the Gordon Sargent invite from years ago? And like, why did he get one if Clanton's not? I think Clanton's like more widespread known. He's been doing it he's been, contending at a professional level now for almost a year. He's done, I would say, without a doubt, more to earn a special invitation than Gordon Sargent did 2 years ago. Gordon Sargent won the NCAAs. That's a big deal. But I think that's the interesting thing. Let's talk. Like what's your big takeaway from thus far on the year? If you had to boil it down to one,
I believe the biggest takeaway from the PGA Tour, or the entire professional golf season so far, should be the outbreak of Ludvig Åberg. And calling it an outbreak, I know that he's already been a known entity, but I do think we've seen the ascension of a top 5 player who, by the end of this year, like I still believe he could be the second best golfer in the world. You look at Ludvig's season just for a second. He finished T5 at Sentry at Kapalua to start the year. His next event, the Farmers Insurance, he was co-leading through 2 days and then got sick and kind of flamed out to a T42, but he was like hunched over sick for multiple of those days. I think it's reasonable to discount those results a little bit. Had to withdraw from Pebble because he was still had that sickness lingering. And then he wins the Genesis wins the Genesis back at Torrey in a strong field, despite a couple of costly mistakes, like finding the penalty area on 4 in his final round. Like Ludvig's playing at an extremely high level. He's 25. I think his results last year look a lot like Xander's results did, where he's just consistently like T8, T5 in strong fields. Like in 2024, Ludvig had 5 top 5s, and that includes second at the Masters, second at Pebble, which was a signature event, 5th at Memorial, 4th at the Scottish Open, and T2 at the BMW. Like this is a player who's consistently contending in events and should be taking a leap forward, which we've seen now in this year, winning at the highest level. So I think it's a really exciting story that we have who I would consider a top 5 player in the world right now in Ludvig, and he's still young and he's playing consistently well. So that's my biggest takeaway.
I think the other thing about Ludvig is that he's got some gravity to him. Beyond just playing well on the golf course, he seems to be someone that fans are generally interested in. He elicits questions of who is this guy, from common guys. Like I have a neighbor who had watched it full swing, and I was asking, hey, what player did you like the most? He's like, I really like that Swedish guy. What's his name? I think like that's, beyond just the game, when you talk about golf, like what's kind of important beyond just like pars, birdies, and bogeys is like the ability to captivate an audience, the ability to have some sort of gravity. And I think that's the thing with Ludvig that is also appealing, is that there seems to be general fan interest in him. I think like he's, the more we get to know him, the better. But I'm fascinated to watch him in the majors this year. I think like he's like the biggest question mark. I like wonder, where does he fall? Like he obviously was extraordinarily great at the Masters last year. I real chance to win the Masters he headed into the back 9 with a shot to win. And he made a couple mistakes, but like, is he a top 3 player favorite for the Masters? Should he be? Is that unrealistic?
I don't know how hot of a take. For me, he's number 2.
That's what I was wondering. I started to think about like, I was kind of started to think about like who would I take right now at the Masters, and it's like, is Scottie or Ludvig probably would be my
Rory's right there, I think, especially for the other majors, but just some of the past inconsistency at Augusta and the way that Ludvig drives it straighter than Rory does, I think I'd be pretty comfortable giving a slight edge to Ludvig there. It's close, but I think Ludvig is firmly in that 2 or 3 spot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's let's talk a little bit about the Masters while we're here. It's kind of barreling down. What are a couple early storylines that you are watching?
I mean, I think we have to start with Scottie, right? He has 5 starts at Augusta, 5 top 20s, 3 top 10s, 2 wins. Like he's quickly racking up an unbelievable track record on a golf course that is low variance. And I think that should be a central part of the conversation when you're talking about Augusta. Like the players who are playing well tend to play well. There are a lot of reasons for that, but Scottie seems poised to make another run. He's going to close as one of the shortest favorites in a long time at Augusta, or, right on par with some other short favorites in recent years. Most of these events, like the Arnold Palmer, he's like 4-1 to win, 3.5 to 1 to win. Like this is a very dominant world number one entering a golf course that he destroys and is set up well for success on. So I think it'd be kind of crazy to start anywhere but Scottie.
Do you feel like he has to win before the Masters?
No. I think he needs to hit the ball well, but I don't think anything else is that relevant. Why do you think he needs to win?
I don't necessarily think he needs to win. I do think it's nice to get a win. I think like I wouldn't want to win like the week before the Masters, like in that classic, like nobody's done this situation. Like, that being said, I would love if I was Scottie Scheffler, and this is not a hot take, but like just, he hurt his hand and he hasn't won since he hurt his hand. And I think it would be, given how I think like psychologically you win at such an astounding clip, like psychologically in golf, like mentality, the approach to professional golf. I think like expectation management is such a vital part of playing great golf. And I think like one of the hardest things for Scottie Scheffler, if you're going to talk, it's not hitting the ball well. That's not a challenge for Scottie Scheffler. It does not appear to be something that he struggles with, right? This is not, we talk a lot about a lot of people, like if we were going to talk about Justin Thomas, it's going to be like what ball striking shows up. Is he going to hit putts on the center of the face? But if we're talking about Scottie Scheffler right now, I think like the one thing I would be worried about if I was Scottie is expectation management. And I won so much last year. Like basically every time I teed it up, I almost won. And I won a lot of those times. If I go 6 events without winning at the start of 2025 and I'm heading into the Augusta, that's maybe not where I want to be. I would really like it sounds crazy, but like I would really want to win an event before this year, because if you look through it like last year, the most he went without winning was like 2 events. I mean, it's insane. Like the most he went was he started the year, he didn't win in the first 5 events of the year, and he won API. So we're basically at the same spot. Then he wins the Players, finishes second at Houston, and wins the Masters. After that, the most he went, I think, is 3 events without winning. And now we're here again. This will be his 4th start without a win. So that would be my, I think there's so few things to be worried about with Scottie Scheffler. That would be the thing I'd be worried about, is expectation management.
I think of all players, there's almost nobody I worry about less with that specific of how you handle the mental space than Scottie Scheffler. I don't think he's got that problem where he clearly gets frustrated, but I think his expectation management's pretty good. I think the other huge shining spot or point of optimism for Scottie is that he finished 3rd at the Genesis Invitational at Torrey, hitting some of the worst shots I've seen Scottie hit. Like it was uncharacteristically bad. And he finished tied for 3rd. Waste Management finished T25, but he was involved in that tournament and then just kind of flamed out during the closing stretch. Like Scottie, in shaking off the rust from his hand injury, has still been in the mix and hasn't been playing his best golf. I believe he will win the Arnold Palmer this week. Like I think, Tiger won it 8 times. Like I think Scottie Scheffler at the height of his powers is going to win that event a lot. He will probably win this week, and then all those narratives will go away about how long it's been since Scottie Scheffler's won.
It's a mid-iron test, and mid-irons are, nobody's better in the world at mid-irons than Scottie Scheffler.
He's also really good at controlling his ball with water in play. Like when there's water down the left, Scottie can hit that down the right center, and nobody's more effective at that. He's not going to be hitting it in the water unless his game's way off. So I think Scottie's winning.
All right, let's take a quick break to talk about the Fried Egg Golf Pro Shop. This is available at proshop.thefriedegg.com. We have a ton of great products in there for you to peruse. We have a bunch of new polos and lightweight spring hoodies from Johnny O. We have a wide selection of Beat Ratty items. We have a lot of hats, different things. It's spring. For people in northern climates, you're closing in on golf season again, which is amazing. I remember that feeling well. It's always good to get a fresh polo to get ready for spring golf. So check out our pro shop, proshop.thefriedegg.com. As a reminder, Club TFE members get a 10% discount in the pro shop every day if you use your code. So check out proshop.thefriedegg.com, and thanks for supporting what we do here. What else are you looking at?
Let's go hot button one here. I think that you're going to see a significant LIV Golf underperformance in major championships this year. And take out the like LIV versus PGA Tour and it's 54 holes versus 72, whatever. Like a bunch of golfers were signed to a tour a couple of years ago that are aging out of their competitive windows. And last year was a bad year for LIV in major championships.
Don't disrespect DJ that way.
Yeah, I mean, DJ's at the top of that list. But outside of Bryson, 2024 was not a successful year for LIV in majors. They had 4 golfers finish in a top 10. 24 of them got at least one start. 4 finished in the top 10. 33 golfers total across tours finished in the top 10 in a major in 2024. So, and 4 of them being on LIV. The consistent standard that's being set on that tour is lower than the consistent standard that's being set on the PGA Tour right now, especially signature events. It is appreciably lower. And there aren't any golfers. Maybe you can make the exception for Joaquin Niemann. Maybe you'd argue John Rahm, but there aren't many golfers on LIV who are consistently playing at that top end level on LIV, finishing T5 every time, finishing T2. And if you're not finishing there on LIV, you're not going to stack up well in a major championship. And we have so many golfers, like Rory has been incredible recently. He's consistently contending. I mean, Rory has finished in, let's see, 4 top 2 finishes in his last 8 starts, including 2 wins. On top of that, almost won the Irish Open and lost in a playoff at the BMW PGA. He almost has 4 wins in his last 8 starts in stronger fields than are on LIV. Like Scottie, obviously, Ludvig. So I think with LIV in general, some of those guys probably don't have the right expectation about where their game stacks up right now and are going to finish lower on leaderboards, especially at the Masters and then subsequent majors, than they might expect.
You've been plugging away at a consistent Wednesday column that's been a delightful read. And I think it was your most recent one, you did LIV golfers who the PGA Tour would want back, right? Like who would add value to the PGA Tour. It was kind of jarring how few of the players are like when you start to think about, and I think this is like, it's been a long time, like 4 years in the life cycle of a PGA Tour player is a long time.
Exactly.
Like, I think like you get lost a little bit, but like I was talking with my neighbor. He's like a competitive distance runner. Like, was like, I think like basically could have been a professional competitive long distance runner. He was asking me like how it worked. Like, how does the PGA Tour work? How does like the, life cycle of a pro golfer work? And when I was like laying it out, I was like, there are guys that are hyper competitive top 20 players for like 2 to 3 years. That's like one bucket. There are guys that are really relevant for 5 years. That's another bucket. Then there are guys that are like super, super relevant for 10 years. And that is like a very few number. And I was like, and then there's people like Rory McIlroy who are relevant for 20 years. And that's like the rarest of rare.
The legends. Yeah.
But like those 2 to 3 year guys are like extremely rare. But like we forget always that it's like 2 to 3 years. And I enjoy Max Homa. He's someone that if I'm at a golf tournament, I go talk to, you know, but he might be a perfect example of a 2 to 3 year guy. And there's like, it's very rare for someone to have a 2 to 3 year run like Max Homa's had, but like he could come back and play. He might be a really like a regress to top 70 player. And that's a great player. And it's a great career to have reached the top 10 in the world golf rankings and be a top 10 player at one point. But like the point of it is that like, it's not out. It's very normal to have like 2 to 3 year runs and then be irrelevant. And when you start to look at LIV, it's kind of like, oh, they're guys just like some of their guys aren't guys anymore.
I think maybe the best example of this, and I'd be very curious for your opinion on this name, but somebody who that exact conversation has unfolded is Cam Smith. Like, it was Cam Smith legitimately like somebody who was going to have a 5 to 8 year runway, or did he play really good golf over a short burst and then kind of regress back to being a 70-ish, top 40, top 70 player? Cam Smith's finished in the top 10 at Augusta 5 times in the last 7 years. I think we're going to get a pretty good feel for where his game is when he shows up at one of the, again, stiff competition on a golf course that suits him very well. Like, let's see what kind of golfer Cam Smith is. He's been fine on LIV, but a little bit inconsistent. Some T2s and some T35s. Like, that's not going to get it done in a major championship. So I can't wait to see what he's got. That feels like a good early Masters storyline, but also kind of what you're talking about of like, how long was this competitive window? Because again, strip the names off. That's what's interesting to me about this thought exercise with LIV is they signed guys to 3-4 year contracts. Some of them were already a couple years into their competitive window. This is what should happen. They should be less competitive a few years down the line.
Yeah, I think Cam Smith's like, I would probably have put him in like the 5-year bucket. I think there are a lot of other aspects of LIV that lead, like giving somebody a giant pile of cash is going to disincentivize certain personalities, right? Certain personality types are just going to be complacent. Like, I think like Cam Smith, he struggled with this early in his PGA Tour career. He mentioned this, like he just didn't work. He not treated as a professional job early in his career. And I think then you get a huge payday, and that's the natural inclination. I think he's shown like the type of personality he is. I think the people that have really long careers in golf are generally like the hyper competitive people. Like, I think that's the thing with Rory, like hyper competitive. Like, think about Phil, like just like insane competitor, insanely competitive, wants to make every pursuit in life a competition, right? Those are the people that have those long runways. I think like the 2 to 3 year guy, perfect example is Abe Answer.
Like, he's kind of playing well right now.
He had worked his way into the top 20 in the world. He was becoming like a real like, oh wow, Abe Answer's around a lot. He's on a President's Cup team. And since he's gone there, he's just completely like wiped off the face of the earth.
He's not playing too badly right now, actually, but he's not any threat to win a major championship this year, even if he gets into them. But I think to put it a little more concretely, Andy, like, or I guess to make a prediction, maybe we'll see a LIV guy spike. Like Bryson Aram wouldn't shock me.
Brooks
Hatton,
potentially.
Like Brooks potentially. But I think I will say that of the top 5 at the Masters, at least 4 of them will be PGA Tour players.
All right. That was... One day we might look back and think that Masters runner-up for Phil a few years ago was more fluky than the PGA win.
PGA win is still like one of the most absurd results ever.
I think that's like the saddest thing about the whole LIV thing. The whole LIV thing, the sad part about it, and this is from someone who's like not a Phil fan. Throughout my life, I've not liked Phil Mickelson. Like, going back to when I was a kid, I was always an Ernie guy. Ernie and Tiger. And like, to me, like maybe the saddest thing about the entire last 6 years of pro golf and like what has transpired is that Phil's win at Kiowa is now like, I mean, that should have been the only thing people talked about Phil Mickelson for the last 5 years is like, can you believe he won the PGA at age 50? What was he, 50 or 51?
Crazy.
It's like, can you believe he won that tournament? He hadn't cracked an egg for a year leading into it. He was just like categorically an awful golfer. And then just for 1 week, he put it all together and beat. Like, I think like there is like this thing with Tiger that people don't like talk about enough is like Tiger's life unraveled after he got beat for the first time. Like Y.E. Yang of all people beat him. I don't think Brooks Koepka, he won Oak Hill. I don't think Brooks Koepka's been the same golfer since Phil Mickelson beat him.
It's funny, Padraig Harrington was talking about that recently when he saw Rory break out for the first time. It kind of set his own game back because he realized his A game could not contend with Rory's A game. So I think, yeah, you hear those stories. The Phil one, if there's been a more surprising result in the 21st century, like you'd have to bring it up. I don't know what that could possibly be. People look back on things like Jimmy Walker as being fluky. Jimmy Walker was a good golfer in that era and was playing well coming in. Like, I think he gets disrespected a little bit. Phil, as you said, was playing terrible golf and then just bang, binks a win.
So outside of LIV, what's maybe your third Masters way too early storyline? Not way too early. It's not way too early.
It's not way too early.
3 weeks ago would have been way too early. This is early.
I've got a bunch. Like, I think
I could just keep going on this.
I'll give you a little trivia question, and this is putting you on the spot. I don't think most people should know the answers to these. There are 5 golfers right now who have a consecutive made cut streak of at least 10 made cuts in a major right now. How many of those 5 do you think you can name, and who has the most made cuts consecutively in a major right now that's active?
So Rahm missed a cut last year.
Yeah. He's
Scottie Scheffler.
Scottie's got 10.
Let's go Scottie Scheffler. Who's just sneaky made a lot of cuts? Rory McIlroy?
No, because Rory missed.
Oh, you missed Masters.
Yeah.
Shoot.
He also missed the Open last year.
Oh, God. Scottie Scheffler, Xander Schauffele.
Xander's at 11. He's second most. There's 2 more at 10, and then there's one who's way above that.
One way above it.
Somebody at 18.
Let me just pull up OWGR. That's not cheating, is it?
No, I think that's fine.
I just want to look at the rankings. Is Morikawa on there?
He's not on there. I can give him to you.
Yeah, give him to me.
Patrick Reed has made 10 in a row, and
I wouldn't have gotten that. Wait, he's not even exempt to stuff anymore, is he?
He's in the Masters. Yeah, he's in the Masters, obviously, with the lifetime. But
what if he got to like 50 made cuts and it was just from the Masters every year, and he played for like the next 4
not out of the realm of possibilities. He plays well there. Patrick Cantlay has made 10 in a row, but then
I almost said Patrick Cantlay, but I just like, I feel like I was thrown off the scent. I just like, I can't get over the stink of the low finishes with Cantlay. That's like just like 10 mediocre finishes.
I mean, they're backdoors when they're top 10s. Number 1, Hideki Matsuyama has made 18 cuts in a row in majors. And I mean, Hideki's also won 3 times on the PGA Tour since last year at RIV. Like, talk about a guy that no one's really going to talk about.
I did not see this. Like, I kind of thought he was toast last year.
He's injury prone.
RIV. Yeah. I kind of thought it was over.
Just he's dealt with a lot of back, neck injuries, but yeah, no one's really going to talk. That's got to be a contributing factor. Like, I think everyone's kind of on the same page with Hideki. He won't be talked about a ton coming into the Masters, but if he wins, it wouldn't shock anybody. And I think he has to be mentioned. He's playing maybe not the best golf of his career because he was really hot in that 2016, 2017 era, but he's playing really good golf right now. Again, 3 wins in the last, 14 months. Like, he's got to be somebody that you're keeping on your radar.
So we talked a little bit about this earlier. It's like, when your hot run as a golfer, like, when does it happen? And I always think about how Hideki had played the best golf of his career in like over like a couple month period when there was no consequential golf tournaments. Like it effectively happened from like October to February. He had this like inferno hot 4-month period. And it's like if that had coincided from April through July, we might be like 3-time major champion Hideki Matsuyama.
You know, it'd be kind of fun to look at like different players around the world and the seasons in the countries they grew up in. Like, do they kind of peak in their, like, is their body on a certain clock to where they peak during like their own summers? Would be kind of an interesting thing to look into.
I think it's a fascinating topic just in general. It's like, is there an aspect of players who grew up with off seasons, like people that grew up in climates that did not allow for year-round play? Is it a bad idea to go somewhere and live like where you've reached this extraordinarily high level of golf with like a certain type of approach to it? Is it a bad idea to go somewhere where you can play year round? And like, does that actually hinder? Like, this is something I've thought about a lot. Like, if you get like people would have like what I don't understand, like golf's like a thing, like people get to the high level. Like I saw this thing. I don't know if you saw this, like Christo Lamprecht has like completely changed his swing. Have you seen this?
No. But I haven't heard his name recently.
Like completely, like this guy got to the #1 amateur player in the world, like with a certain type of golf swing, and like we'll see what happens. But like I sometimes wonder about like making huge changes when what you've been doing gets you to the very top of the game. And one of those is like, if I've always had like this like time where I've had winter and I've hit balls inside and, you know, I've practiced on my game, like, why not continue that? I think like one of the things with Rory this year that like he hit into a net for a month. He just did not see ball flight for a month, which is effectively like a winter. Like going to the Dome. I remember so many times in my earlier life, like I'd come out of the Dome and I'd just hit the ball so good for the first couple of weeks of the year. And like then, because like it creates this like place where you're like, you don't react, because you don't see the ball land, right? And there's something like freeing about that, where if you don't see flight, you don't see the full flight, you don't see the way the ball's like. But like, I wonder about people that make these big changes on when they've already gotten to the top of the game, and it's like, well, like if you just like get used to playing that game, are you just going to keep ascending like you've done your entire life?
My inclination is that playing in warm weather climates where you can kind of be sharp year round is probably always advantageous, but there could be certain golfers who you're throwing them off a little rhythm and when they want to peak for the majors, right? Obviously, there's a conversation here about the changing of the date of the PGA Championship, which has made all of these majors in such quick succession that for a lot of guys, you just want to be peaking between April and the beginning of July. So I hear you. I think I'd want to be in an environment where my game is always sharp, but there are probably some players who benefit from the ebbs and flows of the calendar year versus kind of having that engine running 12 months a year.
I just think about like, you know, and this is like an outlier, but the University of Illinois has built like arguably the best collegiate golf team.
Where'd you go to the last decade? Do we need to disclose any conflicts of interest at this section of the podcast?
I mean, they've been the most consistent college golf team over the last 10 years. And they do it with like they're ready to go in May. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting conversation. And it's like the stakes are too high not to go down to Florida. Like you're so much of golf is counterintuitive. So much of it. It's almost like always like the opposite of what you think is right is usually the right way to do things.
This is like a Dwight Schrute quote. This feels like the Dwight Schrute, I ask myself, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I wouldn't do that thing type quote here.
I'm telling you, like the whole game is counterintuitive. Like success in golf is almost always counterintuitive. and I just wonder if there is some version of doing something different. Also, the other things, like just doing something different than everybody else. Like, is there an ability to find some gains? Like, because there's just such minuscule margins in pro golf, and doing something just a little bit differently might create an opportunity to create a fractional gain that sets you apart. And this is a crazy topic, but I think
I think where it all fits together is that there's clearly an advantage in being in a routine and being in rhythm and standing on a tee box with a lot of confidence and having every box checked. And how you prepare for that may differ player to player, but I think clearly finding a routine that works for you is important. And if you've done something one way your entire life, it might be worth pursuing that further. But do you want me to get into a different storyline?
Yeah. I think that's enough hypothesizing. If any PGA Tour pros willing to put it to risk their millions of dollars that they earn to gain, and create a little experiment of going to live in Alaska for the winter and it falls into a net, I'd love to document it.
The Masters is not a tournament that gets won by long shots. So I don't even calling these two names long shots, I think is slightly disrespectful, but two names of golfers who I think people aren't really considering threats to win, but might be considering a threat to win in a month's time. Will Zalatoris.
I knew you were going here.
I've taken a lot of flack for my Will Zalatoris optimism this year and people saying that he's not in form. Will Zalatoris' track record at Augusta is nuts already. There are 4 golfers in the history of the sport who have finished in the top 10 in their first 3 Masters. 2 were back in the 30s, Paul Runyon and Ralph Goldal. And then we have Jordan Spieth and Will Zalatoris. Will has been incredible at Augusta. He's dealt with some health issues. So far this year, his form doesn't look amazing on paper, but he's hitting the ball well. The speed's kind of back. We'll see exactly over the next couple of weeks where his game is. But if he's hitting the ball well entering Augusta, he has a legitimate chance of winning that golf tournament.
Earnest question: is he exempt?
Oh yeah, he finished top 12 in the Masters last year. He's in.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to make sure because he hasn't done anything, and I really would like Zalatoris to be playing well. I just think the big question is where is he at physically? Because it seems like it's just still not there. And I completely understand why. I mean, he's going through, what is I think outside of your wrist, probably the thing you worry about the most is your back. And he's going through, some issues with it.
That's fair. I don't know that I think his full range of outcomes is pretty wide. He could miss the cut, but if he's in the final group on Sunday, I don't think that should be surprising for a player who has 7 top 10s in 14 career major starts, where he's almost won a couple majors already, and he's putting together one of the best track records at Augusta of any active player. So
is your other guy Cam Davis?
It's not Cam Davis, but it is an Australian.
Get out ahead of Cam Davis. Who's the Australian?
I think Adam Scott.
How can you say this after last night's Ball Frogs performance?
I don't know. It'll be an interesting TGL. How TGL, the stats people always like to look at of no one's ever done whatever and then won the Masters. We're going to see how TGL factors into all this. Has anyone ever been on a team that missed the playoffs and then won the Masters? Questions like that are going to be great.
Has anyone ever been on a winless TGL team and go on to win, a major?
Well, they're playing the Spear. They're not playing Firethorn. So I'm not as worried about it. But Adam Scott's made the cut 15 times in a row at the Masters. That is the longest active streak outside of Tiger. And I just think Adam's form is a little stronger when you dig into it than maybe some people might realize. He had 4 top 10s in 5 starts last year in the summer and fall in good fields, at the Scottish Open, at the Open Championship, at the BMW, and then if you count the Tour Net Championship, he also finished top. I think he finished T4 there. Adam Scott, for a 44-year-old,
100 to 1.
He's long. I mean, I don't know that it's all the way to 100, but it's up there.
I think
Obviously, a former champion.
He's longer than DJ, according to the odds I'm looking at.
That's crazy. If anyone wants to take DJ straight up against Adam Scott, I am a very willing participant in that.
I think he's like 100 to 1.
That's probably about where he is. I would have thought it's like 80 or 100, and maybe he won't win, but I think he's somebody who could finish tied for 6th. Adam Scott still has a ton of ball speed. Like, that's the shocking thing about looking through some of his numbers. Like, the guy pounds it for being 44 and has developed a much better putter over the last 10 years than at the beginning of his career. So I know he hasn't been relevant in Masters. I think he hasn't finished in the top 10 there, I believe, since 2017, but I think he's somebody whose game looks really good right now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him win at some point this year.
I'll never forget. I used to watch Morning Drive before I went to work when I was a 20-something, a young 20-something coming of age in Chicago, and this is when Morning Drive was like cooking. And one of the things they did, they had Adam Scott and his like trainer on, and like you talk about Adam Scott's speed, like the biggest issue physically that they had to work on when Adam Scott was like in his heyday was he was too flexible. All of their physical work was like about reining in the flexibility because it would cause him issues. So it's like you think about like why he's built for like longevity, why he still has speed, why he still is like the guy's always been extraordinary, like freakishly flexible. And it shows. I mean, the golf swing still, it's amazing at 44 what it looks like. Or I think he's 44, right?
Yeah, he's 44. And I don't know, with all these players, the only way they age well, they have to either have a lot of speed and keep adding to it like Rory has, or they have to develop another part of their game. And Adam did that with the putter, which like he's gone from being a complete liability with the putter to being an average putter or even slightly above average at times. Like he's still relevant. He almost took Bobby McIntyre down at the Scottish Open last year. Like I don't think you can discount that little class of Rose, Scott, Sergio. Those guys are still contending from time to time. So yeah, I don't know that Adam Scott should be considered a favorite. I certainly don't believe that. I think those odds are reasonable and should be long, but would it surprise you if he's in the top 5 going into Sunday? It wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, Sergio and Adam Scott, you're talking about literally 2 generational players.
And Rose.
I don't think Rose is in the same class, personally. I think he is. I think that Adam Scott and Sergio, had they not gone up against literally like the greatest player ever, we would think about their careers so much differently. I think Sergio would have had a couple majors early in his career had it not been for Tiger, and that would have completely changed the career. Instead of him just snagging one kind of late, I think he would have been, I think it would have been a lot different. But like, I think like one of the things that we'll look back on in 20 years from now is just how great those players were and how they just like kind of ran into a really, I guess like a completely one of a kind situation with who was at the top of the game.
Yeah, the only pushback I'd even offer is going back through Adam Scott's major results. They're not very good for his first like 10 years on tour. And that's not just getting blocked by Tiger. I mean, he had 4 top 10s in like a 10 or 11 year span. So that's a little surprising about him. And now from like 2011 through 2019, he racked up a bunch more, including obviously his win and then his near win. So it's kind of an interesting career.
The Sergio is much more apt to the real contention. I got a question. I'm looking at Adam Scott odds, 80 to 1, according to one very popular betting app. Right next to him is Matt Fitzpatrick. Is he cooked?
I know you wanted to talk about some Ryder Cup stuff. I don't know that he's on the Ryder Cup team if it starts tomorrow.
Should we talk about it now?
Sure.
I mean, like, what a beginning of the year for Europe. I mean, they look formidable.
They're good.
I think it's one of the more and this is like, I guess this is kind of one of the big themes of this whole pod, is like a lot of stuff happens in 4 years. A lot of stuff happens in 3 years. And I think when you look back at the Whistling Straits Ryder Cup, the general, like, what is Team Europe going to do? They're cooked. Westies, 49. Ian Poulter's not competitive anymore. Paul Casey's old. Like, that was like, just like, there's nobody in the pipeline. And now you look at it and it's like, wait, is Europe dead even in terms of talent? Do they have more top end talent than America? Is a real question now.
It's a real question. I think the top end talent is where Europe shines, especially with this rib injury that Xander Schauffele's dealing with, and that's a big story entering the Masters. Like,
he played TGL last night. I don't know if you saw.
He did play TGL last night. Yeah,
if you're healthy enough to play TGL, you're healthy enough to win majors.
That's a real question. Like, okay, so at the top, if you're gonna have Rory, Ludvig, and Rahm, that's gonna stack up well against Scottie, Xander, Morikawa. Like, there's a real question that they might be as strong at the top. I think Justin Thomas is also playing some really good golf, and he could potentially be a top guy for the U.S.
That JT pod that we did last fall, the things that we talked about with like the optimism for JT seem to all be happening.
Yeah, he's still spraying it off the tee. That's a huge thing to look at. Like, can he just keep it in play a little bit? But you can do that at Bethpage. Like, you can get a little errant. So, yes, I agree. I think it should be about a coin flip right now. Maybe a little bit of Europe top end talent advantage. I think they'll make better decisions with pairings and all of that, which gives them an edge. And then Team USA at the bottom, especially on the bubble, like some of the names we're talking about, is you could put them in, maybe not put them in. Those are much better players than you're saying the same for on Europe. And they have the home crowd, which I do think will be a significant advantage. So to me, it is about a coin flip.
I think one of the things that the Bethpage offers huge advantage off the tee. And I think, like, if I was going to make my top 3 Americans for Bethpage, it'd probably go Scottie, Xander, and Bryson. Also, you have Brooks in there that won at the last major at Bethpage, though I think like his game today is a little bit different than his game then. He was a brute force, a absolutely overwhelming player off the tee, and I don't think that's the case anymore. I think he's lost a little pop in the bat, and it's understandable with injuries and age. But I do think if you throw, but also on the Europe side, like Rory, Rahm, and Ludvig, arguably probably better for Bethpage from a sheer power standpoint.
I mean, they're going to be, those 3 are no fun to play against at Bethpage. I think what will be an emergent storyline, it's going to be a contentious debate this year, is with some of these captains' picks, some of the golfers who don't have a ton of speed but are playing really good golf. What do you do with them? And probably the guy who's going to come right in the crosshairs is going to be Russell Henley, who is playing such good golf right now that if he can maintain what he's playing right now, which he's been playing good golf for like 2.5, 3 years. He got snubbed at the last Ryder Cup. Like, this guy has been really, really good. If he gets left off of the team because he doesn't have enough ball speed, assuming that his form stays consistent between now and September, like, I do think that'll be a pretty big mistake, even if he's not the driver of the golf ball. I mean, he's like a 165, 170 ball speed guy. He's not a speed demon by any stretch, but he's so consistently strong that I think he likely will deserve a spot on that team. But it's going to come down to like, oh, do you want him or do you want Finau or do you want him or Wyndham? Like, those are guys who have a lot more pop.
I think that's like an interesting question when you start to look through the, Morikawa is a lock, but not a speed demon, right? But then when you look down, like, it's like, how many non-speed demons can you afford to have at Bethpage? And you say, like, is the worst case scenario for the US is if Henley, Morikawa, and one other non-speed demon lock up automatic bids, right? Where you all of a sudden have 3 guys that do not move the golf ball out there. Because, I mean, Bethpage is just such, I'll never forget Jeff Ogilvy just telling us, it was on our preview show that year. He's like, if you don't carry it 305, you're not going to win this week. And it was like such a defiant statement. He was like, it's going to be Brooks or DJ.
And that
like,
is who would win.
Gonna be.
That is who would win over a 72-hole stroke play event. I still think it's reasonable, like especially for alternate shot. Russell Henley's playing really well on a lot of other distance-oriented courses. Like he's a very, very good ball striker. So if his performance drops off, like sure, I could see leaving him off of the team. But the way he's playing right now, I think he'll have a strong. Again, it's not till September. Like I think getting too locked into picks is crazy. But
I mean, if you take TGL into account, Billy's got to be a lock. Billy Horschel.
Yeah, well, you should maybe look at just the spear and some of the other par fives on TGL to really do that. If he's cleaning up on these short par threes, I mean, on the rocks, does on the rocks correlate with success at Bethpage?
Do you have any TGL takeaways? Do you have any more on the Ryder Cup? Anything else you want to talk about on the Ryder Cup?
I think it'll be interesting to see like David. I always get confused at how they pronounce his name. I thought it was Puig. I would think it'd be Puig, but they say Puig. I don't know where that pronunciation exactly comes from, but he's playing really good golf, and all signs are that he'd have full eligibility to play in the Ryder Cup. So I think he's going to be an interesting conversation. He doesn't have a lot of visibility since he's playing on LIV, but he's playing really well on LIV. Potential good young name in a couple years too. So I think that'll be an interesting one. Sergio, Rose, like some of those guys will be on the bubble. So it's going to be an interesting year of captain's picks. I mean, Spieth's going to be a really interesting conversation again this year of whether or not he warrants a captain's pick. And people are going to talk about his top finish at Bethpage of the PGA when he gained like 10 and a half strokes putting or whatever it was. So that's going to be a hot topic.
Yeah, that's it should be fascinating. It's I don't know. The Ryder Cup, Ryder Cup year kind of sucks up all the oxygen. But Joseph, thanks for coming on. What's in the hopper for this week's Wednesday article? What are you diving in on?
Maybe you can give me a suggestion here because I'm working on it right now. I wanted to tier players who have had underrated seasons in the last 15 years. I'm thinking like, people forget about 2012. Soon you'll know. And, people forget about like Jimmy Walker being a pretty good player in 2017. So if you have any of those random ones, like this guy was kind of a problem, I'm thinking of, that's going to be the tiers, and then going to get a little in depth on
Nick Watney.
That might be a little early. That might be a little early.
It's like Nick Watney was a problem, bona fide problem.
Yeah.
So you're saying like recent years?
15, let's say 2010 onward. Yeah.
Can we say Pendy last year? Would Pendy last year count?
Might be more recent than I'm after, but I do think, Taylor Pendergrass playing great golf right now. So
Pendy minute.
Yeah, Pendy minute. No, I'm going more for the like JB Holmes, Jimmy Walker, those types.
Your guy Zalatoris.
Yeah, he could end up on there. So that's what I'm thinking for this week. And then I kind of want to write a little bit about Minwoo Lee and who he is. So I think that's a fun. Is Minwoo Lee good or not? Is a fun question.
That's a great question. Is he a better screen golfer than a real golfer? I think
we know that for sure. I think the answer to that is yes.
Oh God, I'm trying to think of some like random good years.
It's kind of fun. You go back through and like, wow, that guy made it to Eastlake. Bill Haas is one of those where like, man, talk about somebody that didn't do a damn thing in a major championship.
I think, I don't want to throw Roberto Castro under the bus here, but he made it to the Eastlake one year. I don't think he'd be offended me saying this. I think he became the first player to go to Eastlake and then lose his card the next year.
History made. Put it on a t-shirt.
I mean, honestly, like we might look back with like Tyrrell's last 2 years have been kind of incredible.
Not in majors.
Like where would he? Yeah, not at majors. Where would he be in the rankings if he played on a tour that he actually got points?
I think if he played a full PGA Tour schedule, would
he be ahead
sure
of Colin
top 10.
Morikawa? I mean, he's 9 right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. OWGR is a little funky right now, but ahead of Colin Morikawa, I'm going to say no. I think Colin's pretty darn good.
Colin's last year would be an underrated year without winning. It would be a great example of an underrated year. You could go Ryan Fox on the DP World Tour.
I think he's sneaky, has a long active made cut streak in majors. I want to say he's made like 8 in a row.
Yeah, he won the net. He tied. I guess he tied for first at the Seminole Pro member. Maybe coming into form here.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll look forward to reading that. I will. I'm gonna be thinking now. Matt Kuchar's probably got a lot of years that would fall into that bucket.
Another player, when you go back and look at it, his resume is not as impressive as I thought. I went through that exercise recently. Like, man, we talk about him as one of the best players to never win a major. Lee Westwood puts Matt Kuchar to shame on that front. Way
to shame.
Way to shame.
Westy was a menace.
Way better.
All right. We will talk soon. Thanks for coming on, and looking forward to reading Wednesday's column.
Thanks, Andy.
Big thanks to PJ Clark for editing and producing today's podcast, and big thank you to all of you for listening to the podcast. We will be back next week. I think we're going to do a players preview. I think we've got a old recurring guest that is coming back. He's making his comeback. I'm pretty excited about that. I'll leave you with that cliffhanger here. Thanks, and we'll talk next week.